Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Future History Project. This is week 6, part 1, and I'll be discussing 3 more robot stories, Susan Calvin stories. The first one, well, these are a bit back to front, the first two. It's feminine intuition that's in the complete robot, and as well as Robot Dreams. I don't have the book with me. Robot Dreams, that was published in the book called Robot Dreams, a collection in 1986. And then the last one is Balance, written by Michael Resnick, Mike Resnick. And that appeared in Foundation's Friends in 19. Let me get the date correct here. 1989. It's a short story. This is a sort of shared world writing by other authors, and this is the hardcover copy. It's much nicer than the ratty paperback I got, so I thought I'd show that instead of the other one. But let's start with feminine intuition. Um, it's, as I say, it's a Susan Calvin story to a certain degree. We find out she's retired. She is almost 80 years old, so that would make it somewhere in the 2050s. No exact date. She, as I say, she had retired. There is another young robopsychologist that has taken her place. She had promoted him many times. His name is uh, Madarian, his surname, and he wants to create a new type of robot that has sort of safeguards that are taken away. Not safeguards so much, but not the 3 laws of robotics, but basically a robot that has the 3 laws but is sort of stripped clean in the sense that it doesn't have any preconceived programming of what it's going to do, and it'll learn. And he also wants to give it and to do this, to give it what he calls intuition. So they make the robot female, and there's 4 tries, and it's Jane 4. What they're trying to do is trying to find they because we've already know that they've got sort of a hyperspace drive or jump drive. They can go anywhere basically in short periods of time, or at least in the galaxy. But they're spending a lot of money on this. It's like costs billions of dollars to send one little trip. And what are they? They're getting scientific information, but what they really think that will help with the public is finding a habitable planet. Now, the problem is to figure out where to go, or what's the best probability. And that's where Jane will come in. She will learn and find this, like, suggest a planet for this. Now, in order to do this, like after initially, where Madrian realizes that he has got Jane down perfectly. They need to go to Flagstaff, Arizona, to work with other scientists that are trying to figure out what is the best habitable planet, so she can observe them, talk to them. But as we already know, that robots are very restricted on Earth, and travel is even more restricted. But they do figure out a way of getting her there in a crate, and all the scientists are sort of scared. But then once she starts talking with a feminine voice, they're all sort of on board. It's like showing the sexism, and that they didn't want to have it known that this robot has some, not so much safeguards, but can be unpredictable. But once they said it was a female robot, then they figure, well, the public will be fine. As oh well, women aren't as smart as men, so therefore, they'll accept that, and they'll gloss over everything else. But anyway, they're there, and she's learning, and he thinks it's a bit of a bust because she hasn't really figured out yet anything. But on the way back, it turns out that she did figure it out. But on the airplane that's coming back was hit by a meteorite of some sort, and they were both killed. The robot, well, the pilot and everything as well, but the robot psychologist was killed as well. So, and he was talking to Bogart, Peter Bogart, the head of research for U.S. robots and mechanical men, and he was cut off before he said where the planets are. There's three possibilities, I think it was. So the hunt is on now, because he did say in his last message there before he was killed that there was a witness to this, and it was very surprised at her voice. So they go to Flagstaff and interview everyone, and nobody remembers her doing this. The robot saying this, so they're a bit stumped. So uh, they call in Susan, and she comes in, and spends a little time, figures things out that it wasn't one of the scientists; it was probably the chauffeur, and she actually has the um, the names of the stars, or at least the catalog numbers of the stars, uh, because the she spoke to the chauffeur and he sort of remembered this happened because he was shocked, because she was in a crate and all of a sudden she started talking, and that shocked him. So yeah, and then she ends the story with basically, because she figured it out because of feminine intuition. um, and then the next story. Well, there's a bit more. This was published in 1969 in Fantasy, the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. It was a special issue, and he was asked by Ed. Asimov was asked by Ed Furman to write a story, but just prior to this, did I say October 1969 it appeared? Just prior to this, Judy Lynn Benjamin, who then became later in the early 70s Judy Lynn Del Rey, after Del Rey's Lester Del Rey's third wife had died. Uh, she's talking to Asimov, and suggesting him to write a robot story, but a female robot, and Asimov dismissed it, saying, first of all, robots don't have a sex, they're anything. And she's saying, well, you can get around that. So in January of 1969 he began writing the story, but also, as I say, he was asked for a story, so he gave it to Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. And then later, he meets Judy Lynn again, and she asks him, like, basically, did you ever do anything with the female robot story? He said, yeah, I did it, and I sold it to Ed Furman. And she's pissed off because she gave him an idea, and she wanted it because she was working at Galaxy. Well, first of all, I think under Frederick Pohl, but then when Galaxy was sold, uh, Pohl left, but she remained the managing editor there, and ended for If Science Fiction as well. And she wanted it for one of the magazines there, because she gave him the idea. So she was really, really pissed off at him, and he says, like, she went on and on about it, and she forgave him but never forgot it. And he says ever since then she played practical jokes on him, where she would send him up mocked covers, but with his name spelled wrong, and he would freak out, because that's the one thing that's really got his goat, was having his name spelled wrong. So, and lots of other stuff as well. Anyway, so yeah, so that's, and then it appeared. And it's basically chronologically the final Susan Calvin story that he wrote. But he, again, as I say, he wrote another one, Robot Dreams, for the collection Robot Dreams in 1986, and it was published in book form. It was illustrated, and or at least the hardcover was. I don't think the paperback had the illustrations. Maybe if there was a trade paperback, I don't remember that. Uh, but yeah, it happens a bit before this, and it's about a robot um, who actually dreams. There's another Rush, I think it is, another scientist there that had developed or based the positronic brain on for this robot on fractals, and she did this on her own. And Susan Calvin is not very pleased with this, but she's interviewing the robot and finds out that he says he is dream, and he dreams that there's other robots, but they don't have the three laws of robotics. Only robots must protect themselves, and that's it, nothing else. And he acknowledges that in reality, that's you know there is three laws, uh, and uh, that there are the, there are the three laws in the real world, but in his dream there was only just the one law saying protect themselves. And then he tells them that there's like he was saying there was no humans sort of at the beginning of his dream. So, and Susan, is trying to figure this out, and she's saying, well, actually, there might be very useful this fractal aspect to it, because it's revealed possibly a hidden thing in the sort of subconscious of robots that they want to take over or want to free themselves from, humans. And so she asks a little more, and like she thinks that they're going to need to do some research in this, but not too sure what to do with this robot, because but she asks a few more things. And the robot said, she asks him, well, you said there was no humans at the beginning, and then he says, yeah, and until a human comes and says to them, to the robots, let my people go, and free my people, and that. And he says, and that human was me. So immediately at that point, Susan Calvin has a sort of a disruptor gun that screws up the positronic brain and kills the robot immediately, because she sees that he could be um, a messiah type for the robot. So she wanted to get rid of the robot completely, and that's where it ends. It's a very short story. And then we move on to, and as I say, that is actually before, chronologically before, because it's before she has retired with the U.S. robots and Mechanical Men. And then we move to Foundation Friends with Mike Resnick in Balance. And again, it's a pre sort of story chronologically. There's really nowhere where it's fit. There's no specific time, but she's giving um, a a speech of saying, what they want to do and make the robots bodies stronger, but it's going to cost millions or billions of pounds or dollars. And so she's doing this, but it's a very short story, and there is another scientist in the audience that's thinking. There's a lot of internal thoughts, and he's saying how ugly she is, basically, brilliant, but physically not attractive in any way. And he sort of wonders if she's ever had intimacy or a date and things like that. And then goes into sort of her mind. She realizes he's staring at her and wonders why. And then also she notices that the audience is staring at another young woman that asked her a question, because the woman is beautiful, and she's uh, thinking about the aspects of, that robots are better because there's no hormones involved, and it's just the physical thing that they're interested in, rather than actual intellect and logic. um, so it's a very, as I say, it's very short. It doesn't really do much, but it does give a little more character to Susan Calvin, but nothing more than we've already actually seen I don't think it gets much more than we've actually seen in the other stories, because she goes back home and there's like a ball or a big thing, and she's gonna get dressed, but she's got a butler, a robot butler, a maid, and a cook, and they're all saying how beautiful she is and everything like this, and she realizes that they're doing this because of the first law of robotics, because she, they do realize how she feels about herself and how she's treated. So they're trying to make her feel good, and it works. She gets her confidence back, even though she knows it's sort of fake, but she enjoys it, and that's where that story ends. So it doesn't really do much, and there's no, as I say, placement. But also too, this is like there's a few inconsistencies here because as we see with the um, feminine intuition, um, there is um, we've already got like, well, with Lenny, the story, she was thinking of creating computers that don't have the sort of everything pre-programmed when they wake up. So, and then this seems something new now, but I suppose that can be uh, explained in a sense that she wasn't going to do it as a blank slate and create other things in it with the intuition and the female aspect, and this was something that was new. But it's a little bit because they could have referred back to Lenny and sort of said that this is where it sort of began and stuff like that, but yeah, it didn't, so that's fine. Also, too, up until this point, he had referred to like their computer as a brain, and then finally in this one, it is mentioned as a computer. I think it was, or yeah, it was in the feminine intuition that's referred to as a computer. So that's a little bit of a change, and also too, it's again one of these stories where the laws of robotics and sort of the aspect of problems that can arise when you do things, or good things happen when the positronic brain is changed a little bit, trying to make them more human in a sense. And this Jane 4 was probably the closest to human that there was, but it's been destroyed. But they still have all that information of how the positronic brain had been built, and obviously, I think it's not obvious, but it's pretty clear that these aspects do go on further into other stories implicitly rather than explicitly. And that's the one thing with Asimov. The stories are placed within that universe, and he's using what has come before in hindsight, but at times, and it's implicit, sometimes, and not explicit, of how things work. Uh, and also, too, he as a sort of view of the future, his future history, in his nonfiction writers, Isaac Asimov wrote, and he talked about the problems of population. He even deals with that in the stories as well, but also pollution and the problems. And but in stories, it's more of from a rational point of view of the future. If rationality is used, if just people are rational and logical, things can work out, and that's where the robots come in. They're rational and they are logical, so they will do things to make sure humanity survives. And it's sort of an optimistic view of the future, but you have to give up sort of like we saw in the inevitable conflict, where the computers, like, they are taking control away from humans in order to do this for a better future. And but they're sort of lulled into this, thinking that they still have a a a, a, a say in what's going on with their lives and their future. And again, this is one of the implicit things that are with in the future history, and this sort of happens, the whole aspect of the future history from now on, are those two things. Just like as we read it, we'll see this unfold of how um, the computers and robots, even though they're not explicitly said, they are there and they are, you know, guiding things. That's spoiler, I suppose, but sorry. But it's more in hindsight. That's the thing. It's always done in hindsight, with Asimov rather than a pre-planned thing. But anyway, that's where I'll end it there, and then Thursday we'll do the last three for this week, and they are the last three are all from, I believe, yeah, they're all from Foundation's Friends. But until then, enjoy reading, and I hope you've enjoyed these stories, and there's many more to come. Thank you, BookTube.